Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Sola Sosa podcast. And my guest today is Kevin Cannella. Cannella. Good to have you, man.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, brother. So, I know we've only known each other for a little bit, but the work that you've been doing has just been so impressive. Um, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the things that you got going on.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a psychotherapist by training and was in private practice for a handful of years and eventually started a nonprofit called Thank You Life, which is a client assistance fund for psychedelic therapy. So when somebody can't afford psychedelic therapy, um, basically their clinic or like a clinic that they might go to can reach out to us and um, we'll see if we have money to help make that affordable for the person. So, because ketamine assisted psychotherapy is really the only thing that's legal federally, we partner with over 120 ketamine clinics all over the US. And yeah, again, when somebody goes to one of those clinics and they figure out that it's too expensive, then the clinic will reach out to us and we'll do our best to make it affordable for them.
Which is brilliant. Such a valuable thing out there. How many assistants or how many nonprofits or how many companies out there are trying to make it more affordable?
Yeah, good question. There's a few doing things in different ways. We're really the only ones trying to help like the just like everybody. There's a handful of veteran specific organizations, and veterans is actually a really big focus of ours as well. I think about 30 of the 111 people that we did this past year were veterans. Um, but yeah, so there's a handful from like Healing Our Heroes, Warrior Healing Network. Those are two that we partner with. There's also the Heroic Hearts Network, or Heroic Hearts, and a few others in there. Um, but a lot. So Healing Our Heroes is actually a really great example, and they do ketamine retreats here in the U.S. But a lot of the other ones take the veterans down to like outside the U.S. to do psilocybin or ayahuasca or something like that. Um, yeah, so there's like we're really the only ones that we know of that are doing it here in the U.S. in a very local way, where you're going to a local ketamine clinic, so you're not having to go on a big retreat to get this work done.
Well, the retreats are amazing and psychedelics are amazing, but how do you see the current state of healing right now? I think you have the psychedelic revolution that's maybe going to get a big push and help with RFK Jr., but are we still in the early stages or is it well underway? There's a lot of work already being done in the country or around the world. Like where are we at right now? Like what's
Good question.
current state of affairs?
I would say a little bit of both, but probably more on the side of still very early. And most likely a good bit of the work being done is still pretty much underground. Again, except for like the ketamine industry. Now, worldwide, I think there are a number of other types of medicines being used above ground. And of course, here, you have like some church models that are still very much in a gray area. They do their best to work with lawyers and kind of have their shit together legally. Um, Yet, if the DEA still goes and raids them, the DEA still goes and raids them. And even if they take it to court and win, it's like they still need to go through that process and potentially get arrested and get charged. And so it's like, it's a very kind of murky and potentially risky, area, even if they're doing everything um, in line with the laws and the kind of freedom of religion that the Constitution gives us. Um,
Speaking of the law,
yeah.
have you heard stories? Back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, I would hear a lot of buddies getting caught with weed and stuff and getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear that as much anymore. much less mushrooms or other substances. Are the law enforcement even looking for that? Like,
I have no idea.
have you heard of any stories? Like,
I haven't
it's not
really.
really, yeah, it's not really the issue or the focus. It's more hard crime. Like,
I think so. I think you're right. And like hard drugs. And yeah, you know, like I was looking up something about like airports, and I was living in Boulder and Denver at the time, and it was something like there were 30 cases in 2017 of like drug arrests at the Denver airport out of like 2 million flights. And my guess is that a lot of people are flying with cannabis, especially in and out of Denver. And I think the kind of my takeaway from that is that they're not, you know, people aren't looking for to arrest people for like personal cannabis use. My guess is that all 30 of those cases were either somebody was, you know, completely out of their fucking mind in terms of like their behavior and it drew attention to them, and or like major kind of like trying to move like a lot of drugs, most likely hard drugs.
and then if they're moving that much, they're probably distributing. They're probably like in the business
No,
of
exactly. So I think stuff like that is the focus, and not if somebody has like a gram or two of cannabis flower or like a joint on them or something. And then of course there's like things like gummies and things too, where it's like, I don't know, can they even detect that? Is that even possible?
chocolates. Like, how can you differentiate? Even
Totally.
though capsules, like, how can they differentiate? So it's definitely, obviously they're looking for explosives. And
Also mainly that's the other thing, is like even beyond drugs, they're mainly looking for like, yeah,
so yeah,
bombs and
the
shit.
culture has shifted, and it's so common nowadays that I'm, maybe because like you attract what you are, birds of a feather, and so I'm attracting a lot of psychonauts. But for the brand new people who are curious or just never heard of these things, what was your psychedelic journey like? And you know, there's so
Yeah.
many angles that people find this, and I was very cautious. Heard Joe Rogan talk about DMT and ayahuasca. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that eventually. It's called to me eventually, um, and it just seemed very edgy and like so risky. Like, you're gonna lose your mind, and so I was pretty afraid. But I did a lot of research, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
Before you answer,
Gotta check that work. I can edit this easily. All right.
Yeah. So I first heard of magic mushrooms in high school, I think, as like a lot of people did. And this one very interesting experience sticks out, where a friend of mine who actually lived in my neighborhood told me of his one moment of his experience with mushrooms. Now, at the time, the kind of like running thought that I heard was that it makes your brain bleed, and that is why you hallucinate, which is like so ridiculous. That's not what happens. I think if your brain bleeds, you're gonna like, is that an aneurysm? Is that what an aneurysm is? But that might be the case. I'm not totally sure. Uh, yeah, and then I mean, I really, for the most part, would not consider what happens hallucinations. I really don't think that's what's happening.
oh yeah, I never considered the definition of that word,
Yeah.
hallucinations.
So anyway, what he described was that how he like crossed the street. He's on mushrooms, and he crossed the street, and the wind blew, and his mood completely changed. That's all he said.
Hmm.
And it just, there something about that. I was like, what? Like, it just intrigued me. It deeply intrigued me. I don't even know why, but there was just such a kind of curiosity there.
Pattern interrupter was just something different that
Yeah, I was like, what? How? That just sounds so, I guess even to just be that sensitive just felt like such a new concept. So anyway, that happened. Fast forward a few months later, I'm in a freshman at Georgia Tech, and very quickly began smoking pot. I had tried pot a few times in high school, my senior year, and first of all, was just loving cannabis and kind of just how it opened my mind. I was able to get very silly, but then also was able to just think about
Mm.
big, interesting
Yeah.
things and about, who I am, that kind of stuff. It was all very interesting. And I started somehow was just like doing some research about psychedelic experiences. I think like Arrowid, I think it's called, and just, kind of back, they still exist, but that's just like old, early internet, people just giving trip reports.
Oh.
And then there was also this one description where they outline these 4 phases or like levels of experience with psychedelics or mushrooms specifically. And, level 1 was like, say what it might be like on a gram, where like you see some visual stuff, you like feel a little something in your body, things get tingly or whatever. Level 2, level 3 is like getting pretty intense. And then level 4 was like, it was basically like near-death experience. Everything goes white, unity, kind of merge with God kind of thing. And I was just like, again, just like, what is that? That's possible. And yeah, it was a combination of like, that's possible, and like, what the fuck is that? What does it even mean? What is that like? So again, just such a kind of curiosity drawing me in. So anyway, me and 3 of my friends ended up trying it one evening, and we were just kind of walking around campus and had a kind of silly, goofy time. And I think what really stuck out was toward the end of it, was kind of coming down, I guess, but I just had this sense that I was just reading Perks of Being a Wallflower at the time, and in that book they describe like this like feeling of infinity. I think the main character is like riding in the back of a pickup truck at, in his teens in high school and felt alive. And it was something really like that for me. I was definitely using the word alive, like, oh my God, I feel so alive right now. And then I felt this, almost this like sadness and longing for my family and for my sister, my parents and my sister, and really wanted to do this experience with them, which was also for me as an 18-year-old, very kind of just like strange. I was coming out of a high school experience where I had a lot of frustration and anger toward my parents and didn't feel that connected with my family at all. So yeah, in some ways it was very odd to me that I would be thinking of them like that and wanting to have a sort of deep experience with them. So that was my first one. And basically we all enjoyed it. And so over the next, 4 years or so, probably, 10 to 15 experiences with LSD, psilocybin, and MDMA or ecstasy that was definitely sometimes cut with amphetamines. But yeah, just had, my first experience with MDMA was
At a rave?
basically at Bonnaroo at a Tiesto show.
Tiesto was my first DJ. Love him.
Same.
You too?
Yeah. And so that was my first experience being able to dance. That was my first experience feeling the music, feeling my body move with the music, and noticing that it was unconscious. Like, oh my God, I like switch as the music is switching, and it's so clearly like outside of my like conscious thought.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was a super profound experience for me being, a relatively like repressed,
Of course.
suburban kid. So like that was a really big experience for me. And then, yeah, like looking back, I would say I was having fairly mystical experiences. Also, tons of like laughter and silliness with my friends, but also these like moments that were just like unexplainable. I didn't have too much of like a concept of them. Another interesting one is, this might be my like second or third or fourth experience with psychedelics in general. And I was at the University of Maryland with some high school friends. So I grew up in Maryland. A lot of my friends went to the University of Maryland, and I had such a fascinating experience. I was like to my high school friends, like, "Hey, let's try this. Let's do some mushrooms." So we walked around campus a little bit. Definitely got overwhelming a little bit. And later in the night, I was in the bathroom and just stared at myself in the mirror for a while.
I mean, isn't that, it's not, the experience of that is like seeing yourself for the first time, seeing the details in such a profound way, right? Or what were you experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a really deep connection to myself. And I realized that I loved myself, which again, just contextually was kind of like a strange thing. But and I think what I was really connecting with was like my own curiosity and freedom and kind of like willingness to go explore, and like that I was finally able to actually go do that a bit, which I didn't really feel like I was able to do before college
Mhm.
started. But yeah, and then, I walked out of the bathroom finally and I was like, hey, and I let them know, I was like, I love myself. And it's funny to like hear people have that realization on psilocybin, kind of however old they, or not psilocybin, but just psychedelics in general, however old they are. And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah. Like that was a pretty profound experience for me to have at 18, 19.
Yeah. You said something that you didn't have a context for some of these mystical experiences. When I first had my experience with LSD, I was kind of referring back to like, oh, these things are evil, but it feels really good. So like good is bad. So I was like trying to contextualize what's going on as well.
Yeah.
So the language and the philosophies and the communication with it is limited based off of how much we've read, how much we've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
I mean, totally. Somehow, even from very early on, there was this sense of like, there was a realization that like consciousness is everything. It was like, oh, the only thing here is consciousness. Like somehow, even beyond this physical realm, it's really fundamentally just consciousness. And I was diving a bit into some um, like quantum physics sort of stuff with that. Um, so I had a little bit of context, not as much of like a spiritual mystical context, but still some of that like consciousness exploration context. But to your point, so we were talking about Groff. You just saw that Sam Groff book. So he's the one that really came up with the term transpersonal psychology. That is what my master's ended up being in at Naropa. It was mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling.
Hmm.
A basic definition of transpersonal is beyond the personal. So I would say like things that get more into what psychedelics can offer, what spirituality can offer. A lot of psychedelic experiences can be very personal and like having to do with like my trauma, but they can also be very transpersonal where we, go into like our like racial or lineage experiences or trauma, or you know into other species, or kind of zooming out where we like feel like we're the earth or the solar system, or all, it's all kind of beyond just like my personal self and my, you know personal psyche, so to speak. Anyway, that's kind of what transpersonal is. But there's this idea in transpersonal psychology of spiritual emergence/emergency. And the basic idea is that people can have these sort of awakening experiences. Psychedelics is certainly one avenue to kind of open that up in people. And for some people, it can kind of be this catalytic point where they can go in two directions. It becomes a spiritual emergence and they really kind of awaken, or it goes into a spiritual emergency because they're quite ungrounded and a lot of their kind of old reference points are crumbling and they don't really know what to make of reality. And people can have like psychotic breaks in that direction. And
Wow.
one of the so they in that they name two things that really can influence which direction it goes, and it's basically having support like having people that you can share the experience with, and get support in your experience with. And the other is having a contextual framework for the experience. And to be honest, I think that's why, I just heard something the other day that schizophrenics in some other cultures, they will also have like auditory hallucinations of voices like schizophrenics in the US do, but they're often like silly voices, not like, paranoid, like violent and scary voices like are often experienced here. So my point with that is like, I think a lot about schizophrenics is like they're wide open, but they don't have a conceptual framework to help them manage that experience. The only real conceptual framework that they have or is put on them is one of psychopathology, that, they're fucked up because they're hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there. So, yes.
I want to dive deep into that mental health, and then the context, like you said, the framework. For example, if someone really had this story in their head that a lot of terrible, nasty things maybe put to them by their parents or peers, that kind of context will lead them down a bad path, maybe? Or what do you mean more by the context, that
Yeah.
framework?
So I imagine someone who has a psychotic break, and it might not even be their family or friends saying anything particular to them, but it could just be their family and friends having no other reference point for what they're experiencing other than the idea of psychosis. And then the medical community around them having no other framework to categorize or understand this person's experience other than psychosis.
So then people who are diagnosed with depression, bipolar, and such, is it just not having more definitions, more understanding of what people are going through? Or, help me understand a little bit of those differences. And because I've seen where, like you said, they don't have the support and the medical system just medicates them, puts them in the mental hospital, and then that's pretty much it. But you fix the soil in their pot, their environment, the nutrients, the love, the support, the teaching, the purpose, and they don't need any medicine and they're flourishing.
Totally.
So what do you think these diagnoses are? Like, what are these mental health states in your point of view?
So something that I think is really interesting is like, so all diagnoses come from the DSM in terms of like, psychological things. Currently it's a DSM-5, and
What does it stand for?
Diagnostic and Statistic Manual.
Oh, okay.
So that, you can go look up in there, and they all have codes: major depressive disorder, and then, a host of other kinds of depression, and other mood disorders. There's like, there's like psychosis stuff, schizophrenia, different personality disorders are in there, bipolar 1 and 2, bipolar with psychotic symptoms. Basically, everything's in there. But they're all just symptom clusters. So, it's very different than at least some pieces of the medical model, where it's like, with some medical things, there's a root cause. It's very tied in with the diagnosis. Like an infection. You have like a particular bacterial infection, or like there's a particular virus and you have a viral infection. And that's the root cause, is like that bacteria is in your body, or like that virus is in your body. There's no like, in the DSM, it doesn't get down to the root cause like that. It's just saying you have major depressive disorder because you have this collection of symptoms, or you have enough of the symptoms in this collection that we check you off for major depressive disorder. Another interesting thing is like a key piece to diagnose somebody is that these symptoms are disruptive to either their work and or their like relationships and family life. And so, in theory, two people could have the same symptoms. One person could even have worse symptoms, but they're still able to function. They would not necessarily be diagnosed. But the other person, even with lesser symptoms, they're not able to function because of the symptoms, and they would be the ones diagnosed. My kind of conjecture, and I'm definitely not the only one alone in this, is that it's really fundamentally trauma is the kind of underlying piece to this all. And so trauma, childhood trauma, is really like the root cause of a lot of these things. And then there's a lot of different possible ways that people could sort of deal with them, and they end up showing up as these different symptoms. So, you and I could have very similar trauma, but you have anxiety and I have depression. But it's both rooted in the same sort of trauma. But you just dealt with it one way, I dealt with it another way. And we all kind of have our own kind of degree of resiliency. And this just gets into like nervous system stuff and how our nervous system operates and what's overwhelming for my nervous system versus yours, all of that kind of stuff. My sense is that a lot of that ends up determining what sort of, symptoms, or another way to say it would be like coping mechanisms that we come up with. And just like what kind of coping mechanisms were learned in early childhood. I think I lean more toward depressive symptoms, and I think that was like a learned thing, but other people definitely lean more toward like anxious anxiety symptoms. And I think a lot of that is about what the kind of opportunities are in childhood and what is like reinforced in childhood.
This is so valuable for me, and learning about these things. And I'm starting to see, like, if you look at the world and you see these beautiful babies, and they see two babies see a snake. One gets traumatized and the other one falls in love with snakes. Like you said, like it's so interesting how the vibrations of life, the bangs, the hits, the traumas, they turn into just different things for everybody. And the better we equip ourselves to have this vocabulary, to have these conversations, this knowledge, the better equipped the next generation is going to be to deal with the challenges and know what's love, what's fear, and what's useful, what's not useful, and to make their own life, which will ultimately lead to a better society, right? Like you said, there's a famous quote that for every 10,000 people attacking the branches, to only one or two at the roots. And it's just so much more effective to get down to the root of things. And like you said, it's a nervous system thing. It's I heard like our bodies is like the interface of the world, but it's not really who or what we are. And that's what meditation can start teaching, is like, man, we are the program and the programmer. And those are some advanced, profound concepts to like truly understand and be able to witness and experience. This gives me so much invigoration to like learn these things, to then be an instrument to help others who are just completely lost, like have no education on this, especially like growing up in a Mexican family. it seems like the developing world and the developing world, because the developed world that has a lot of wealth have access to ketamine therapy, have access to therapists, or have access to better education and or more well read. But if you've never heard of these ideas ever before, because they really only live in educated circles,
Yeah.
then, my neighbors who are, I saw a bunch of them, like their keys are stuck in the truck and there's like 6 dudes just helping them get their keys out. So like if you're in constant survival, constant like repairing and fixing, you won't really be able to get to the higher ends of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
100%.
So
100%.
would you say that's pretty true? Like, there is kind of that bias towards wealthier, more educated communities for this kind of work, this kind of growth?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I think it makes a lot of sense why, on one hand, psychotherapy is just over 100 years old. I think it was like the 1890s when, somebody can check me on that, but when Freud was like, first getting into these things. Yeah, and so like, just like it took us to have like an agricultural society for a lot of, like art and like business to sort of evolve, because it took us to, segregate into like some people grow all the food, but they grow all the food. And so that means other people don't need to focus on growing food at all and can, learn to paint, for instance, or whatever. And the merchant class is able to emerge, and people can focus on metalsmithing and basket weaving and all these kind of things that don't quite emerge if we're all just in clans that are hunting and foraging constantly every day. To me, it's kind of like that, and that like you could almost look at that as like one advancement in Maslow's hierarchy. It's still very much, yeah. So yeah, going from like daily survival to like a more societal framework for, and how much we can like build, how much more we can like build from that. To me, it's the same kind of thing that like, yeah, that there's at least, say in like at least first world countries, mental health is emerging as / like spirituality, and just this idea of trauma and healing. And I think about like at least what my idea of like the 1930s is, and yeah, it's something that I think does take a lot of leisure time and some level of like abundance.
What I'm seeing now is, I grew up with MTV and rappers and NFL athletes having the good life with all the chains and the spinner rims and the
Sure.
girls and stuff. That's, as a young boy, that's kind of what you think wealth and stuff is. But with spirituality and mental health, there's this great author. His name's Young Pueblo.
Yeah.
And I love his one-liners and his quotes, and like the new status symbol, the new wealth, the new MTV Cribs is inner peace, right? Is beautiful community, beautiful relationships. And that truly is like the wealthy life now, which is beautiful news too, because you don't have to, it's much easier probably to cultivate inner peace than it is to be a millionaire probably. You see all these people who may be successful in just one area, but now it's definitely about that integrated life, the success in all areas, because it takes away, like if you don't have health, then what good is money, right? And if you don't love yourself, then what good is having a loving partner? You're always going to be limited. I think, that is, as, we have these conversations as I do the work of, I guess, spreading the ideas out there, it becomes more clear to me to help others where they're at to find whatever lesson they need to hear. Somebody, I keep referring to my neighbors because I live in a neighborhood where it's the working class. It's mostly Mexicans or El Salvadorians or just Latin people, you know, living traditionally, like outside of their truck late at night, playing the music loud as hell, drinking a bunch of beer. And just, it grounds me because that's where I came from. That's my ancestry, that's my people, and that's where I came from. But then I'm like, what unique set of life experiences I got to have to really evolve, to really evolve, to really evolve. Because I do feel like I'm really blessed and living quite a fortunate life. Not monetarily, but that's relative. But spiritually or just mentally, I feel like I am in that spot where I'm self-actualizing and now wanting to step into leadership roles and to help others too. And that's why I'm doing this, because nobody really looks like me except for people who are brown. So like the voices and the things that I listen to are like Aubrey Marcus, Joe Rogan, Chris Williamson, like people like that, but they don't really look like me. So um it could be as simple as that, like, oh, here's another brown guy. I'm brown. Let me listen to him. Like, oh, I saw him on my feed. So sometimes the relatability could be like, oh, he has glasses. There was this quote Gary Vaynerchuk said that your spreading your message is so important and your relatability is so important, because he had some kind of like scar in his head or something like that, and he felt very subconscious about it, that when his favorite wrestler opened up about like how he also had that same kind of scar or something like that on his head, he instantly became his favorite.
Sure.
So like it's whatever that person needs to see for that relatability, which is why we all gotta use our voice and let our light shine, because there's a bunch of people out there who are gonna be inspired by you to then start the journey and to start this path of awakening. And then people will help themselves with their food, their water, their environment, their relationship, their boundaries. Like everything starts changing once you start on this path, right? What do you think are some commonalities of the spiritual path or the mental health path? Like, you know, um, I find like people like if there's like a meme, like the awakening survival kit would have spring, like Mountain Valley water, no shoes, like barefoot kind of thing. You get what I'm trying to say? Like
a
there's
sauna cold plunge would be in there.
sauna cold plunge, and those are the tools that we have right now.
Yeah.
Um, what were some of the big changes you made? Like, were you always healthy, or did you always have good boundaries? Like, what was some of your arc of awakening that?
Yeah. And, one thing I'll say is I love what you're saying about relatability. And in terms of what we have access to, just information and ways of thinking, I think we're so fucking lucky to be here in Austin, Texas. And I feel like there's a handful of cities I don't really know about outside of the U.S., but inside the U.S., there's a handful of cities that...
What are some of those cities?
Say like Boulder, most likely, the big ones, LA, SF. I'm sure New York you can find a lot. And, I was on Maui for about 5 years too, and there's definitely a big sort of conscious community out there. I imagine like some places in the Northwest too. But I think Austin's a really big one. And I think it's so helpful when there's community around. And I'm not even necessarily super plugged into the community here, but just that it is here and that I can go to an event where different kinds of things in this, whatever like bucket this is happening, I think is really helpful. And to not be seen as like weird for it or like too outside the norm for it. Yeah, I know people, especially like in the Northeast, who really struggle to find community. I also know a friend outside of Cincinnati who says the same kind of thing. She was here for the Austin Tantra Festival and was just commenting how like none of this stuff is happening in her city.
Where's you from?
Outside of Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
Kentucky side of outside of Cincinnati. But
Why is that? Is it just too country? And then is that too close-minded? And that's just simply what it is?
I don't know. I mean, I think that gets into like the roots of where all of these things started, which I imagine a lot of this is just like out picturings from like the 60s, from like organic food, yoga, psychedelics,
Music,
health and wellness.
movement.
Yeah. And then psychology stuff, 5 rhythms, dance, all of that kind of stuff. I think about Esalen, which is, I think has been around since
What's that?
The 70s. It's like a retreat center in California that has a lot of different workshops about psychology, spirituality, all these kinds of things.
It's starting to get more mainstream. Like originally you would hear about a bunch of celebrities going to Rhythmia in Costa Rica or like ayahuasca retreat centers, like all these celebrities going out there, or billionaires who are like almost dead going out there. And then Aaron Rodgers being very public about it.
Yeah.
And I think, who knows when, maybe when it becomes legalized, or at least not Schedule 1, is that what they are? Once that happens, things will progress, but there should be some guidelines and parameters around it. Like, these things are powerful and
for sure
should not be taken lightly. Like,
yeah, I think there's like kind of 3 different schools of thought, or like kind of buckets that I would describe, and I really think there's a place for all of them. And one of them is the more clinical model, which a ketamine clinic would be an example of. So that's like a lot of what we're doing with Thank You Life is, partnering with ketamine clinics. So we're mainly just in the like legal, above ground medical model,
which is the safest way to be introduced to this work. If you have the symptoms, this is the best way.
For sure.
Any names of like local centers to reach out to that you think are doing good work?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's like 120 of them, but
That's a lot.
If you're here in Austin, Illuma is a great one.
Illuma.
Transcend Ketamine is a great one. Yeah. There's a couple different directions I was going to go. Yeah, but I kind of lost my place.
Which I'm thinking of maps right now in that book. And did you get trained by Rick Doblin, or is he the one who's kind of in charge of maps?
He's not a clinician.
No.
So yeah, I did a MAPS training. I did MAPS as MDMA training, but he's not a clinician.
He's kind of like the spokesperson that I've seen, like, who's...
Yeah, he's the founder. Yeah.
And where I'm very curious on, and I'll just mention my recent experience, is I had been doing personal journeys for a few years, and the majority of the experiences I had were a lot of childhood trauma healing, father wounds, mother wounds, personal, like all kinds of things. And it's so incredible, like how many quantum leaps of evolution I had with each one. Like, I'm a completely different person than I used to be. Yeah. I'm so grateful for it. But recently I decided to finally, I read this one book who I guess is friends with Stan Groff as well, but I think his name is James Fadiman or something like that. He wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. And that's the first time I ever heard of the most therapeutic way. If you have to do it underground on your own, blindfold, safe set and setting, very safe set and setting. You want to really be in a safe place. Let everybody know that you're going to be taking personal time. You want to be interrupted. Blindfold and headphones.
Mm-hmm.
And I played East Forests because I heard Aubrey mention it once and I saved it for later years ago. And East Forest psychedelic music for psychedelic journeying. Put that on, and man, what a story it told. I really felt like I was communicating to Source directly or God directly. I felt like it was very motherly. Like I definitely felt like a very feminine presence, very loving and abundant. So many downloads. So like right now, I think my takeaways is to truly remember to find that inner peace, that stillness. Make sure I take time to rest and I'm working with this guy named Benjamin on really relaxing my nervous system, which I thought I did. And I thought I had good sleep and I thought I would relax. But man, the amount of tension we hold on our body and the amount of relaxation we can access into truly can unlock the doing even better
100%.
without getting burnt out. But without going on so much of a tangent on that mushroom journey, I want to
I think
hear
it takes a lot of energy to like hold tension in the body. And so when we're able to relax that, it actually releases a lot of energy. Like if you imagine that we start at 100, all the tension in the body can bring us down to like 40 because 60% of that is just like, it takes so much energy to keep something chronically contracted. So to be able to like release that is actually a huge deal.
And what I find though is most people, I was in that journey to seek comfort. That's the path of least resistance. Water just flows and we'll find the least resistant path. And so everybody's relationship with pain and discipline is very pivotal to your evolution because you're not going to release your tension if you're lazy. You're not going to go for a run, do exercise. Like we have to find ways to release pressure. And that was one of the downloads too. Whether it be sport, music, like that is just the byproduct of this life is pressure. And finding outlets for this pressure is how we cycle this energy. And I think I heard the definition of trauma, or one perspective of trauma, is stored energy in the body, maybe. I don't know. What is the definition of trauma? Like, what is trauma?
There's a lot there. I'm definitely not the spokesperson for like holding the definition of trauma, but I can certainly talk about it some. And yeah, to your point, I think it all is it's that in-breath and out-breath, contraction, release. It's just like the ebb and flow of the universe is all just contraction, relaxation.
Rhythm. I love rhythm.
And, there's nothing wrong with contraction. It's like how we move. It's how we get things done. It's more just like the chronic contraction that is really an issue. Okay, so to speak to trauma, but then I remembered what we were talking about. I was going to talk about these 3 different, like ways to engage with psychedelics, basically. So we were talking about the clinical way. The second way is more the church model, which I would say for the most part is taking these medicines in community, in a group, with some sort of facilitator and or, they might call themselves a shaman or something like this.
Does that include like going to like Peru and stuff? Like just as a group setting?
Yeah, I would put a lot of that in that bucket. And then the third is just this idea that as adults, we have the right and freedom to explore our consciousness. So, yeah, and like, who's the state to try to like play this parental role of telling an individual what they can or cannot do with their own consciousness? Yeah, it's all like very interesting.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Someone will try to put laws on what you can do with your own consciousness. Why do you think that is?
Yeah.
Get a little conspiratorial on? Because that's been going on for a little while, hasn't it?
Oh, I mean, I think it's all just yeah. I think what this country was trying to be founded on was setting up a system that resisted the very sort of natural desire for power and control that we've seen in those in power. So like trying to just resist the authoritarian impulse that humanity has. So I mean, and fundamentally, I just think a lot of it's about that.
That's a simple way to put it too. You're right. Like, and if you look at history with that lens, it's as simple as the ego likes power because it likes control, and that's the nature of the ego, to protect yourself and preserve yourself. It's a tool that most people, and I'm still learning to understand, but I see it as like a sword. It's like a tool that I have, can be used to build things, but also it can be used to hurt things as well. And if you look at religions and governments, of course, there's some good intentions in there to help the people and to make roads and institutions. But of course, since humans are flawed, nobody's perfect. So we got to mitigate against those things. But you can see how religions, you can only get to God through me.
Yeah.
That is one of the most narrow controlling paths to make you disregard everything else is witchcraft and the devil.
Yeah.
Which is what I was told.
Dude,
That's scary.
The idea of these like Christian people in the U.S. thinking that like anything coming from Buddhism is like witchcraft or from the devil. Let alone more like shamanically oriented things. It's such a limited perspective, and gosh, it's like people just have no idea what these other people are even saying or talking about.
But don't forget to give me your tithe, though.
Bro. Yeah.
But like, I grew up around the church and things like that, and with every good, there's this shadow as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's did so many good for so many people for so long, but I think the next wave. I heard Michio Kaku talk about type 1, 2, and 3 civilizations. Have you heard of that?
I have, but yeah,
It's brilliant.
Familiarize me again.
Yeah, so soccer is a type 2 sport because it incorporates the whole world. And we still don't have a type 2 government or society, or like there's certain things that transcend the whole world, and we all unify with that.
Transcend like the kind of nation state boundaries, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we will create something or evolve something to unify the world, to agree on, okay, you think Jesus...
Tip 3 is like intergalactic kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
And the idea I'm conceptualizing right now is,
or interplanetary at least. Yeah.
Which the downloads that I got was, yes, we are headed to the moon, we're headed to Mars, we're headed towards, because just to touch on that, it's such a rhythm to the universe. It's like stars will die, stars will be born, and we get the energy from the sun, and it's pretty damn good energy that lasts a while, but not forever. So we're gonna have to move eventually.
Yeah.
But that's maybe not our lifetime. But to develop a religion, because anything that we practice is a religion. I don't know what the definition exactly is, but whatever your spiritual practices are could be considered, hey, this is Kevin's religion. This is, I don't know. It's just a word. But like, if Jesus is too charged for a lot of people, if Muhammad is too charged for, like, we maybe will birth a worldwide system to teach people how to evolve that doesn't lead to wars and terrible genocides and things.
Yeah.
Which
reminds me of the idea of like the difference between a horizontal religion and a vertical religion. The vertical religion is like my connection to the divine. And I think that is something that a lot of these things that we're talking about is pointing us back toward. And I think that's what religion should ultimately do, is like not take and centralize power. Like you were saying, like only the priest can be the conduit to God, but push the power out to the people and show the people how to connect vertically themselves.
I never heard it put that way.
And then, the horizontal. And I would also break it into like the esoteric and the exoteric. Like the esoteric is more like the mystic, the vertical religion, connecting,
knowing God yourself
in your heart, exactly, to the divine. And the exoteric is like, and like one way I put it when I was kind of early on my path was, I think we need to make this shift to, do you believe in God, to how do you experience the divine? Or like, what are your experiences of the divine? Because fundamentally, I think this idea of like belief and what do you believe in, first of all, is all we're talking about is what somebody consciously says they believe in. But I mean, put them in certain situations and really get into what their unconscious beliefs are. And a lot of what their conscious beliefs in Christianity or whatever the fuck it is will break down. And we'll see what they deep down really believe. And it's going to be based on their experience.
Yeah.
I think a lot more of what our focus should be, because, if you play with conscious beliefs in psychology, once again, all that shit breaks down very quickly. And we realize that our lives are being run by our deep unconscious beliefs that are born out of childhood experiences for the most part. So it's like, okay, you say with words like, I believe that like Jesus was the Son of God. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? What does that mean?
It's just a lot of speaking script.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the more exoteric. The more esoteric is like, what did Jesus mean when he said, I and the Father are one? What did he mean when he said, I am that I am? Why do they capitalize I am in that whole statement in the Bible? And how do all those things relate to a lot of similar concepts in Buddhism and Hinduism and a lot of the different religions and cultures of the world? So to me, that the esoteric is like, and the vertical is the path of the mystic. And, like you were saying, the one's personal connection to the divine.
What's your experience of the divine?
It's an enormous question.
You can share some of them, because I'm sure it's been multiple.
Yeah.
Subtle and profound.
And I think the first thing that I'll say is like, I heard this one thing about how there's like I think it's a Christian thing. There's like 144 faces of the divine. And I think something I appreciate about my spiritual experiences is the breadth of them, that they've come from so many different types of things, from meditation to psychedelics to, sitting in the presence of a spiritual master, to singing and dancing. Some of them have been alone, some of them have been in groups. And and then the experiences have just been wildly diverse. Some of them are much more in the emotional realm. Some of them are like visions. Some of them are much more still and quiet. Yeah, and they're all quite difficult to put into words, but there's a couple that stand out. So I've done a number of these vipassana meditation retreats, these 10-day silent meditation retreats with this teacher who has since passed, S.N. Goenka, who's this Indian man who grew up in Burma. And, Vipassana is the meditation of the Buddha.
Can you go into detail about that? Because I'm hearing so much about vipassanas.
Yeah, man. I'm just gonna take this off.
For like complete beginner.
Yeah.
I don't really
So
know.
I'll share about my experience first, and then kind of go into it. Actually, wow, there's another whole very interesting experience. So we we meditate like 10 hours a day in these, and sometimes it's just like in our rooms. It's often like a kind of dorm style, bunk beds and whatnot. And we also meditate in the meditation hall. And during this one experience, I was just in my room. I was sleeping on the top bunk, so I was just like kind of sitting on the top bunk and meditating. And probably lasted like 3 to 5 seconds. I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 seconds. But I was just in this place where I felt like I was sitting in eternity, just watching everything, watching sensations come and go, just sitting in this like piece of eternity, like PEACE. Um, I think it was so still and so quiet and so kind of like awe inspiring that yeah, it just really kind of struck me.
Wow.
And then of course like my mind came back online, and then I wanted to have that experience again, and craving came back, etc. So vipassana, I mean, this is one of my favorite things to elaborate on, and I really encourage anyone who feels called to go do one.
What a commitment though. 10 days?
Yeah, it's a commitment. It's an intense experience.
Of just when describe the meditation too. Do they teach you how to meditate? Like
Yes, they take you step by step through the whole thing. The basic of it is like the first 3 days, you're watching your breath at the nostrils. So like every time your mind goes away, you bring it back to the breath. And it's not just watching the breath, but really trying to feel the breath, feel the sensations like all around the nostrils of the breath coming in and out. And so over 3 days, basically that's just a giant concentration technique. And bit by bit, we get more and more sensitive to feel more and more subtle sensations right here. Then you learn vipassana, which is like a body scan. So starting at the top of the head and just trying to feel sensation in each little place, going all through arm, front side, back side, leg, like, and then back to the top of the head, and just kind of doing it over and over and over again. And the idea is, again, on one hand, it's like building sensitivity. And so at one point Goenka, the teacher, describes that this is like a bird with two wings. One wing is awareness and one wing is equanimity. And so the idea behind the equanimity is that what's happening is like we are reacting to these sensations with craving or with aversion. Some of them feel good and we want to grab onto them, and others of them feel bad and we hate them and want them to stop and we want to get away from them. And through this technique, we start to see that, first of all, they're all what they call anicca. They're all impermanent. None of them are eternal. And I can sit there might be some like pain in my shoulder, but I can notice how it's not constant. It's like here and then here and then here. It kind of is like jumping all around. And basically through this technique, just begin to like break it all down and see that it's fundamentally just these sensations that are changing on their own. And because they're changing on their own, it doesn't even make sense for me to react to it.
that's amazing. Which a lot of things are meant to which a lot of things are meant to, you feel them, but you don't react to them, which means like emotions are like water. You feel it and let it flow.
Yeah. Yeah. So fundamentally, this technique, like, quite literally purifies the mind because we get practice not reacting like we typically do. And so it's just this 10 days of like practicing doing something different than our mind is used to doing. And it just kind of like reverses that process a bit. And I mean, people often come out of there just feeling so still, so much less reactive. And, there's like quite a permanency to it. And, I did my first one in 2010. I did 4 of them in the first 11 months. I liked it a lot and was just going hard. And I've done probably about 15 of them total. And there's a significant, I feel like I'm quite permanently changed. And I also meditate daily and keep up the practice a decent amount. Although not as much as I used to, just because I'm so much more like in the world and working and doing those kinds of things. For a while, it really got to be like my main focus, which was amazing. But boy, does it work, and does it create like stillness and peace and a lack of reactivity. And that doesn't mean that people become like lazy or like inept. It actually means that we're like way more energized and just way more clear about the work that we're doing. And to me, like just motivated in a much purer way. We're not motivated by like, I don't know, the chips on the shoulder like you were talking about.
Like, I'm gonna prove them wrong.
Totally.
Can you walk me through your meditation practice? Maybe so I can learn 1 or 2 things and incorporate it. Because right now all I'm doing for meditation, and it's fine and it works, for me. But I'll play some like daily calm free YouTube video, like 10 minutes, or
Sure.
like a 15-minute one, and sometimes a 20-minute one. But I do want to level up my meditation practice and
Go to Vipassana, bro.
go to Vipassana. 10 days. I don't know. I have certain things on my list that I want to do first before I need to get a business to work less than what I am. Like, not because I'm lazy, but just to work on myself more.
Yeah.
Which is the best work there is. But I do plan to do a darkness retreat, Vipassana, and some other plant medicines as well.
Yeah. And I think what's been so powerful about Vipassana for me is that it's such a concrete technique that if I go do anything else, from like a sweat lodge to psychedelics, I have that as a practice I can orient toward. And it's a practice that like brings me back to the awareness that I am. And that feels really helpful for like, I would not want to go do a darkness retreat without have like that sort of practice. I feel like I would just get lost in my fucking mind and go through a lot more misery than would be necessary.
Your meditation practice? What do you do daily to?
Yeah, mostly Vipassana.
So Vipassana is the body scan and
Body scan with the recognition that it's all impermanent.
So whatever sensation I feel, just recognizing that's impermanent.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge too, because I am not as sensitive or tuned in to notice my sensations. When I'm doing a body scan, I'm kind of numb the whole way through.
It's great to just be able to even name that and notice that. And that's why the like 10-day intensives are so great. I mean, my body was like that for for not fully, but it broke down each time. But like for the first like handful of the 10-day retreats, it's just working through a lot of fucking numbness. Yeah.
Building sensitivity, the dopamine resets,
Oh yeah.
it's such a ebb and flow too, because when my attention span doesn't want to read and scroll instead, that's when I know I'm like, ah, damn it.
Yeah.
Do you get lost in the sauce sometimes and have to catch yourself and come back out?
Oh, totally. Yeah. For me, it's like YouTube and playing games like chess online.
You play chess?
Yeah.
So do I. Yes. But we got a game coming in the
Yeah.
future.
Let's play.
Yeah, chess can be addicting. Games, and what do you think about distractions? Let's talk about that. Like, they're fun games, they're fun puzzles, right? They're fun things to solve, and dope. Like, I guess it's dopamine, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
and a good book or a good chess match, it's a little bit better dopamine. It's a little bit like, seems like the more delayed you can hold out the payoff, the better the payoff.
Mm.
I'm not too sure on those concepts, but I do know that there is a war on your attention. There is a war for your mind. There's a war for your eyeballs for
sure.
and that's essentially what all these brilliant minds behind the computers at TikTok and Instagram want to capture your life force energy, which is your attention. Is it sinister, or is it just top brilliant mind business, right? I think it's just, I don't know if you've seen Social Dilemma, and it's just, you are the user, you are the
product.
product.
Yeah. It is fucking creepy when they put it like that.
Yeah, but 60 white dudes behind a computer up to your, listening to your like desires, like, I want to go on a Carnival cruise. And guess what? I'm gonna probably see later. Carnival ads. I'm gonna see ads for the Carnival.
Yeah, it's a wild world that we live in.
I like ads. I like to buy stuff too. So I know that they're gonna have the option of like, yes, have relevant ads for me, or no, don't spy on me. It's hit and miss there. But what was your relationship with paying attention and that discipline of cultivating your focus? That's kind of the superpower to manifesting, right?
It's a good way to put it, is like, yeah, like, I mean, the superpower to like a lot of success really in any endeavor is the capacity to focus. I also think what is like really underrated is pure will. I think a lot of people, including myself, wait around for motivation. And motivation's a feeling that comes and goes, but will is like, yeah, and it's like, it's easy to do something when you're motivated to do it. And I think there's also something to, finding your genius and trying to set your life up so you only are like in your zone of genius more and more. I think there's really something to all of that. And especially like starting something from the ground up, often we're going to need to play all of the roles until it gets like successful enough where we can have other people and pay other people to do other aspects of it.
Ooh.
So,
which gets so many people stuck.
Yeah.
That is like that is such a good line that, yes, developing, I really, really love that. Because so many people are so defeated doing work that just defeats them and crushes their soul.
Yeah.
When they just need to identify what their zone of genius is. But then you're going to have to get lucky meeting the right people, or you have money, or you're just going to be patient and just do the work.
Yeah. But yeah, so I also think there's really something to being able to use our will to do things and not need to like wait for motivation to do something. And
will and discipline, same thing?
Yeah, totally.
Is that the same thing?
So, I mean, the idea of like having, okay, I guess you already have some sort of vision about something, whether it's wanting to get better at chess or, yeah, starting a podcast, or even just like, applying for a new role at a new company. Yeah. If you make that decision, then to act on it, and I mean, I struggle with this mightily, but like acting on it, whether I feel like it or not.
is the key. Then how does one develop that will? Because a lot of people end up just snoozing. They end up choosing to Candy Crush,
Yeah.
right? They end up choose the Taco Bell.
And I mean, I think the key is right there in that word that you're using, choosing.
Mm.
Like, it's your fucking life. Choose what you want.
Do you think people are actually choosing though? That make these the self-destructive choices?
I mean, on some level, yeah.
On some level, but the other level, it's like they're asleep and I can
Yeah.
cast a spell on you to go get the new spicy chicken sandwich at Popeyes.
Sure. I think there's some of that too. And yeah, it's like, and I think that's why, you know, having just a vision is so helpful. And again, even if that vision is just like, I want to get better at chess. And even if all that means is like you stop scrolling and start playing chess in your off time, you know, it might not really do anything for much else of your life. But yeah, I mean, I think all we fundamentally are is awareness. And I think all we fundamentally have is like our will.
Mm.
But I think a lot more people could use their will more to get what they want.
I guess that's part of the journey is learning how to use it and learning how to fine tune it because you have less willpower at the end of the day after you've used it all up. It's energy based maybe.
Sure.
And
And we definitely need to like recuperate.
and that stuck emotion then kind of goes back to trauma. That stuck, like if you're not safe within yourself, if you're constantly distressed, that takes so much energy away.
Yeah. And I think there's really something to this idea of inertia. You know, inertia is the energy it takes to shift something out of its current state.
Ooh.
Which could be stillness, like the inertia to, like if I slide this chair across the floor, once it's already sliding, it doesn't take as much energy to keep it sliding. But to get, you know, to break the initial friction of like it being still to it sliding, you have to like break that inertia. At the same time, it also applies to something already in motion. So if this chair is being slid in this direction, to slide it in this other direction, it's the same sort of thing. There's like an inertia that you need to break or overcome. So I like to really think about that idea a lot with like habits. So talking about like will, and I agree, I do think there's a cap on like the amount of will that we can wield each day. And so I think at first, if somebody's put no intentional thought into their day and their life, their lifestyle, their habits, it's good to start small because it's going to, there's so much inertia to overcome to just implement this tiniest of things. But I think a good approach is just to do things bit by bit. Yeah, and I feel like once there's like some positive habits rolling, then you can actually get the benefit of inertia, that it's actually inertia that's going to make it really easy to keep those things in motion that are already in motion.
That's the flow state.
Totally.
That is all the rage. Do you experience flow?
Sure. In moments, for sure.
I want to learn music so I can get lost in it.
Cool.
Do you have anything that you can feel creative like that to where you're really in that energy?
To be honest, I think it's podcasting and talking about.
Yeah, I've been feeling that as well with this conversation too.
Yeah, talking about things in like the kind of psycho-spiritual realm, I think is one of my delights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, I'll double tap on that because so it is for myself, because it's so rich, the life you can cultivate on this path and on this journey. What are some of the voices or the tools or the resources for people to start putting together, like a toolkit to that worked for you, or maybe that you recommend to others?
Oh man.
Like you told me the Vipassana before the darkness retreat. That is priceless advice.
Yeah.
And I and I do want to, I follow this incredible guy named Andre, and he's in a Vipassana right now, and he does them quite often.
Cool.
And he has an incredible podcast called Know Thyself. And like,
Do you know him?
I don't, but he's in that spiritual community, and he's pretty high up there, and he's only 28 years old, and
Damn.
he's just he's tuned in. Like,
Yeah.
brilliant dude. And I keep hearing about Vipassanas, and I keep hearing, and it is like, what I actually feel is like the price it costs of my comfort, my resources, and my time. That's the resistance I'm feeling. So I'm going to set my life up to get to that Vipassana, and right now the psychedelics are pretty convenient right now, and I'm learning so much for them. Like I really feel like a baby getting to know the divine. Like I really feel like the divine was even telling me how to understand, like have you ever seen those maybe like Moana, like as they're telling the story of the ancestors or whatever, and like they're painting like cave art. It was kind of like that, like in black and white. Like I was seeing how the divine has given us these animals that gladly sacrifice their lives to nourish our bodies, and all it wants is to give love and thanks back to the food. And that was a straight download from them. Like, so it's like I feel like I'm barely learning how Source wants me to live in good harmony. And
beautiful.
Yeah, and then like this world is so resilient. Of course, we've poisoned it a lot because there's a concept called surviving progress. We've progressed so much on the left brain of things that the right is catching up. The spiritual side of things, the creative side of things is catching up. And it was pretty amazing to say that, like, get more in tune with rewilding myself, like, because we are a part of this world, and the cities and the boxes we've created is to protect the ego part of ourselves that is definitely safe. So I'm gonna get more plants, and I'm gonna take care of the nature that's around me. Instead of like, it's easy if I went to Hawaii or whatever, something like where nature's so beautiful, but I can take care of my neighborhood right now. And I live in kind of a rough apartment complex, but I'm like, well, this is where I'm planted right now, so I'm gonna make it beautiful. I'm gonna take care of it. So downloads like that is what psychedelics are doing for me, and what's tapping in. But I think that I've been able to have so many breakthroughs because I've had a meditation practice.
Sure.
I read books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, Untethered Soul. But really meditating and the power of now, I've been able to feel those still moments that, like, you'll notice the sun rays come in, and then you're just feeling what it feels like to be still and just seeing the beauty of that. So those are some of the things that I just recommended. What are some of them for you? Like a 101 toolkit for somebody brand new to start emerging in this.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what kind of books come up, but if you're interested in more like mysticism and spirituality, Autobiography of a Yogi is like one of my favorite. Also, The Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley is super fascinating, and that talks about the esoteric underlying philosophy of all world religions and how they're all pointing at the same reality. Really beautiful.
He's a brilliant writer. I did my best through Island, and I didn't really get much because maybe my focus wasn't good enough yet.
Totally. Yeah, he's dense for sure. I also think this stuff called the raw material or the law of one is very, very interesting and fascinating.
That also
I know
looks
I told you
dense.
about
I
that
know. I
before.
looked at it. I'm like, maybe I need a physical copy and the audiobook to be able to get through that.
Yeah. You know, some other ones, I'm currently listening to The Holographic Universe. I'm loving that kind of stuff. It really hits like just that kind of intersection between like mysticism and things that we kind of currently think of as like magical or impossible, and science and research that kind of shows. I love stuff like that. I love this physicist Nassim Haramein. He has really amazing
He has an accent,
things.
and he appears in a lot of documentaries.
Yeah.
I've seen him.
Yeah.
That's a unique name.
Yeah, he's
Have you heard of
world.
this documentary called Thrive?
Yeah.
What on earth will it take? I think that's first. He was on that a lot.
Yes.
That's where I first seen this.
Yeah.
Talks, I think, a lot about the toroidal field, maybe.
Yep.
Which is brilliant.
And the like 64 tetrahedron grid, which is essentially like a Merkaba shape.
Yeah.
As being like the structure of the vacuum, essentially.
The sacred geometry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is such a fascinating concept that has been carved into stone around the world, right?
Yeah.
And
sometimes even like laser etched into stone.
I think in places like Göbekli Tepe
and Egypt, yeah.
Which, you know, that's where I first was introduced to crop circles, and I had no idea that that's actually what they were putting on there. Like, I didn't verify the info, but it just was so abundant. I'm like, wow, okay, well.
It's a really interesting rabbit hole to go down.
Which is relevant to like these UFO sightings in New Jersey. Like, my point of view for aliens, and this will be a nice good standalone video about our thoughts on ETs, aliens. And I would love your deep dive perspective on this. They've always been around, you know. I haven't seen the episodes on Gaia, this like Netflix for spirituality.
Yeah.
But I've even seen like a preview clip that there's different races. Of course, there's some good ones, there's some bad ones. And I totally think that like things operate karmically. Like if you've done a lot of harm in this world, then you're probably not gonna sleep well at night. Like if you're an evil person and doing some harm and you're doing wrong things, that's like a poison that can maybe stay in you. And then there's also like ancestral karma, like maybe that like has been passed down to you, that maybe you didn't do much wrong in this world, but like you might be cursed still or something, and might be possessed, or maybe even the environment around you can put that energy into you. And that negative energy, or that like fearful, destructive energy, is the dark alien race, the dark spirits. That's kind of what I imagine it as. It's very vibrational, it's very interdimensional. Artists depict them throughout, you know, they may have a face that they manifest through, they may have different faces or different imaginative things that they are. I've heard it put too that we create them, and we create them, and they are also out. It's both. Chicken or the egg kind of thing. But then you have, you know, what dominates the universe, which is love and light. We're alive. We're here. There's life. If it was nothing but hell and evil, then why isn't it anarchy right now, right? You get what I'm getting at?
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about that. I've heard that we live in a fairly like remote place in the universe, that a lot of other places in the universe are suffused with like love and light in a way that it's like just a little darker here, which kind of makes sense. It's pretty fucking violent and such here. And for some reason, what you were talking about reminds me of this one part of the raw material that talks about these two basic paths, the path of service to self and the path of service to others. And
Mm.
fundamentally, I see these as like really kind of energetic orientations. When I'm around a group, am I trying to like suck energy into me, or am I trying to like radiate energy out of me and let there be a feedback of energy back into me from what I share?
Mm.
That's more like service to others. Like I'm going to focus on the giving and know that that will create a feedback loop of, receiving even more energy than I give out. Or am I just going to focus on myself and just try to like bring everybody's energy and attention into me
Wow.
without giving anything back, or with giving back just enough crumbs to like keep them investing in my energy. Yeah, they describe that as basically two different fundamental paths to like growth and awakening. They also
It
describe
sounds like the light side and the dark side,
100%.
right?
And
And you can awaken in the dark side?
yeah. So basically
Because
they're,
that sounds unconscious. Like or someone choosing to, do they choose that?
yeah. So what I think is really interesting is that there's markers for these things, and basically like the mark of service to self is empire building and enslavement,
Hmm. Hmm.
which I think we see a lot of in this world.
Whoa. Empire. That's what Aubrey calls it too. He just calls that energy, he calls it empire.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like a very kind of like hierarchical, like kind of only worship me kind of thing.
But do you think that's
Compare
unconscious though? Do you think that's
I basically see like a dark triangle, and on the other side, service to self, I see like a lit up flower of life, essentially, where we're all just like our own nodes that are like co-creating and kind of co-sharing and playing in the energy of creation.
I think his name's David Hawkins of Power versus Force, that the love is so powerful that it really only takes a few to balance out, or like that the amount of love that there is to the amount of evil in proportion is just, I don't really know what the numbers are, but just there is a lot of evil in the world, but there's more love, like more love and light. There's a lot of harm in the universe too, a lot of destruction and craziness, right? But whether it's a conscious path or not, the dark path, that's maybe not really too important for me to find out or know.
I agree.
Yeah, it's more of such a good perspective that people have said for a while. The secret to life is giving. The secret to life is helping others. But I think that does come in stages, because you do have to help yourself first, right? Or can you?
100%. And I don't think that is yeah, I think that's a different thing than like whether I'm like sucking the energy into me or like giving. I think that that's different than like, yes, I need to like carve out time for myself and focus on myself and not just give everything away and be acting from like a depleted place.
Which is huge. And I had a realization about that too, because once I had my original awakenings, I had a bunch of car sales coworkers, and I started preaching to them. Like I wanted them to be my students, honestly, because I just wanted to help. I knew like you could come from like a very benevolent paradigm, like I want to help. But the thing about helping others is is it doesn't have to be ego driven, like you have to listen to me, here's my curriculum, here's my students, buy my course. A lot of times it's a smile, it's a hug, it's a handshake, it's a conversation. It's and then of course there is the time and place for structured learnings as well. But I love that about the energy of giving.
I think a good way to think about it is like, imagine what you're giving is water, and you carry, let's say, like 2 64-ounce water bottles with you. If by the end of the day those water bottles are empty, but you're still just going to people, like trying to pour water out of these empty water bottles to give, like you don't have anything to give. So yeah, the next step would be to like go fill up your water bottles. So it's like, yeah, we need to fill up our internal resources so we actually have something to give. And when we're out of resource to give, to go fill it back up.
Which, to tie it back, is one of the focuses for Thank You Life, right? To have resources to make the impact, which is the game we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
How if anybody listening, like what would be the way to donate, help?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for people interested, you can go to thankyoulife.org. Thankyoulife.org/donate if you want to give. You can also reach out to us through that website if you have questions or just want to talk to us about what a gift might look like. We would love to talk with people who really feel inspired to make a substantial gift, and we're also really looking for people who can give a small amount monthly. And that's something that really keeps the whole thing moving forward, is all of these small monthly donations. So if you're in that kind of boat where, you can give something, and again, everything we do is to give financial assistance to people who can't afford psychedelic therapy. So please become a monthly donor if that feels something that you're inspired by.
I'll make sure to put that link in the description too.
Cool.
And
and people can follow us on Instagram at thankyoulife_fund. We have a YouTube channel that you can find us, Thank You Life. Might be the same thing, Thank You Life Fund. And yeah, we're coming out with the Thank You Life podcast in January. So it sounds like by the time this is live that our podcast will be out. So you can go check that out. And
are you going to be having conversations with other practitioners, or with who?
Yes. So really the main thing is to interview some clients who've received ketamine and grants through us. Ketamine through our practitioners and grants through us. So we'll have some of those stories, which so far have been so beautiful and so powerful.
Yeah.
To really hear from people, like, what their life circumstances was, what their healing path has been, and then also really diving into like what their experiences on the ketamine were and how they integrated them.
How well do you know them? Like as they're applying for funding, or as they become the candidate who receives the donation, are you vetting people? Are you like, how do you know them from A to Z?
Yeah. So, I mean, our team gets an application from them and then makes a financial determination as to like what, if they qualify and what their grant should be. And that's all based on like income and household size and cost of living, wherever they're living, kind of all those factors. Excuse me. And then, we have the clinic that they'll be going to make the clinical determination as to like if they're a good fit for ketamine and what their diagnosis is and that piece of it all. And then we end up doing a grant agreement with them, and they're kind of off to the races.
And then you interviewed some of them. I'm excited to hear some of those stories.
Yeah, and so we also collect pre and post data on every client, specifically their depression score, their anxiety score, and their PTSD score. And across the board, we've seen on average a 50% decrease in each of those, which is so amazing. And yeah, so these people are really getting their lives back, which is something that we hear over and over again, which is so, so special. And then, also interviewing some practitioners that we partner with. And then other people, other kind of like big psychedelic voices. So yeah, please go listen to us. It's a great way to see what we're up to and see the impact that we're having.
Beautiful. So on the energy of like you said it so well. Most people start off. In fact, that's kind of the nature of the ego, is being narcissistic. We see the world through through my own lens. And a lot of things are about yourself, right? But truly cultivating that energy of abundance to take your eyes off yourself and focus on another really is healing and is pleasant to be around. I'm sure when you meet somebody, the biggest turnoff is if 100% it's just them word vomiting on you, right?
Sure.
And that's quite common.
Quite common.
And all you really need to do is give them How to Win Friends, Influence People. That's like the first 101 on
100%.
right?
100%. That was like my original self-help book back in undergrad.
Really?
It was so impactful for me.
Yeah.
It's so great.
It's definitely how to win friends and influence people is,
Get people to like you.
yeah.
Like, oh, focus on them. Who knew?
Who would have known? And
People like talking about themselves. Who would have known?
who would have known? And, without that knowledge, though,
Yeah.
without that knowledge, you're just, I don't know, at the whims.
Fucking swimming in the dark.
Swimming in the dark. And of course, maybe you evolve from using it for influence to the healthiest way is genuine curiosity. Like you just
Totally.
love people. You just love cultures. You love others. Because there are some people who've been wronged and had a lot of pain and say, I hate people. It's obviously not the best. But I'm excited to read Gabor's new book called The Myth of Normal.
Yeah.
Because it's such a powerful title already. Like, what is normal? And what is healthy? Do you, what do you consider a new healthy relationship? Like a 50-50 exchange? Are you okay with them being a little bit narcissistic and being 60-70% of the conversation? Like,
I think it totally depends on the context. I'm talking about like friendship. Yeah. My sense is that something healthy would really naturally ebb and flow, and that there's conversations where it might be more like therapy, where it's like 100% focus on one of the people and something that they're going through.
Which probably happens a lot to you since you are a psychotherapist. You end up probably doing therapy to a lot of your friends?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it therapy, but definitely like using my skills to show up and listen well and hold them in their emotional experience and those kinds of things.
What a power that is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I really appreciate having the skill. And I think I had a decent amount of the skill before I went to grad school, but I feel like now I have the skill and the like framework of like how to use the skill and what the different skills kind of do. But yeah, in some ways I feel like I have a really high standard for my friends because I want the same thing back that I give. And also in romantic relationships. But yeah. Mutuality. I think mutuality is a huge piece. Reciprocity.
In romantic relationships, the nature that I'm finding is women just want to be. They don't really necessarily want to have these conversations, maybe. Maybe they do to their therapist or something. But I'm finding holding more, finding a support group of other men to share the load, essentially, of life. So that way I can, and of course it's important to share with your partner important things that you're moving through, but part of my journey is like not unloading everything onto my partner or like just holding things. And sometimes I'm noticing what I can hold and what I can't,
Mm.
which is interesting. I don't know what you mean by high standard of reciprocity for your partner. Is it more like
It's like a capacity to hold space for me, like I hold space for them.
just being able to hold space,
Yeah,
which is a skill in itself?
for sure. For sure.
I didn't know about what holding space was because I always tried getting people to be happy.
Mm.
I think that's kind of the toxic positivity that's out there.
Yeah.
Well,
Just letting people be, like you were saying.
yeah, letting them be. Well, I think you mentioned the story of one. Is that what you called it?
The law of one.
The law of one. And it talked about that, the two different paths, the two different energies.
Yeah, it's like definitely a core piece is whether we take the path of service to self or the path of service to others. And that essentially for like their whole kind of framework is that we're these complexes, these souls that are like evolving lifetime over lifetime. And that fundamentally we're going to end up choosing one of these paths and then having that really be the path that we take to, like eventually come home.
Which I remember we got into this thread for what we were thinking aliens and angels are and things like that. So these UFOs, I think they're a advanced species that are loving, that are here to advance us, and our powers that we have right now, like Putin, Trump, Kim Jong-un, like people who have nuclear powers. Thank God that there hasn't been nuclear war. You know, sometimes I always wonder too, like Russia's really losing this war and they may just get desperate, and maybe the influence of these UFOs is to show like they are in charge, because I've heard stories that they would disarm nuclear arsenals.
Yeah.
And
Hearing stuff like that makes me feel very protected.
yeah,
And who knows what would happen. But yeah, like holy moly. It's scary to just think about nuclear war. But yeah, and it is a weird parental thing to be like, to hear those stories and be like, oh, maybe the aliens are protecting us, but like, gosh, we could use it.
yes,
Because we're very much
right
in this
now
like teenager phase,
we are. That is a great way to put it. The powers that be.
adolescent phase.
Yeah. Have you seen this movie called Ender's Game, or the book?
No, but that was one of my. I think I have seen it, but anyway, I watched it quickly. But that was one of my favorite books in high school.
Yeah. Okay. So then you know better than I do since you read the book, and that touches on this topic of like the other, the thing that we're afraid of,
Yeah.
the thing that doesn't look like us, that maybe looks like an insect or maybe it looks like a reptile
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
And
Boogers.
the boogers.
I think that's what they're called in that movie,
Oh really?
in Ender's Game. Yeah.
And so it was so, you know, crazy to see like we got to get them before they get us. That idea, right? Like eliminate the threats.
Yeah.
And that is a pretty primitive way to live, but it's understandable too. Like,
Isn't that what kind of Star Wars is about? This like idea that if anybody comes here, it's going to be to like extract our resources. I think that's so fundamentally flawed. I think the only way that you're going to get here is because you've tapped into the energy of space-time and are not, you're not like hanging on a thread of like planetary based resources.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's such a rich, like the amount of minerals and shit on meteors, like there's just endless.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think you need to go like rape and pillage other planets necessarily.
So I do feel protected as well. Thank God for this advanced race that has made us sure that we don't enter into nuclear war. It makes me wonder though, like, all the nuclear testing that they did, how that was let to be. So then that makes me wonder again, like,
And like we did drop 2 bombs.
yeah. Apparently there's some documentaries I heard that it sent the atomic bombs sent like a cobweb, like when a bug hits a cobweb, it sends a ripple
Mm.
to the spider to go and get the bug.
Mm.
That the nuclear bombs, ever since the nuclear bombs went off, it sent the signal to these advanced beings that we have now achieved atomic technology, and all the UFO sightings from then on started to happen. So maybe there was a war, maybe there was something, or maybe they're very subtle, or I don't know how they communicate. But obviously, we didn't blow ourselves up. There was a lot of, I don't know how many bombs went off in this atmosphere, in this world.
With all the testing, yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know.
But that kind of makes me think then, what about nuclear winter and stuff? Like, how many bombs does that take? So they're disarming these nuclear sites. They're probably very present right now because of how tense this world power of Russia is losing. So maybe with the next few years, my prediction is the US continues to thrive. Apparently, like, I hear news too, like China's kind of imploding, the birth rates are in decline, like things are really going to shift and change in such a dramatic way. Artificial intelligence, right? Robotics. I take a very positive look on all these things because fear sells so much, and the clicks of fear porn just is a lot of people's strategy, especially mainstream media.
Yeah.
But every time I do these plant medicines, it's just so abundant and so loving that anytime I have that feeling of love and then I think of something scarce, it's like, oh, here's more abundance. So that truly maybe is the message of just no fear.
What that makes me think about is like, if we zoom out of this particular incarnation that we're in, I highly suspect for a lot of reasons that what's going on is like a reincarnation kind of system that helps souls grow and evolve over incarnations. And from that kind of perspective, there is so much abundance. Like the worst thing, or maybe not the worst thing, but like what's inevitable in this life is death. It's like definitely going to happen to us. But then if we don't get what we came here for, we just come back.
That's right. You just come back.
And yeah, we just kind of keep going until we level up to the next thing, and then to the next thing, and just, wherever that goes. So that like, there's certainly not like a scarcity of incarnations or time in that sense. At least that's my sense of it.
No, I agree with that. I totally agree with that because that is the feeling that I had felt as well, that death is just the concept. Because you can have an ego death, but your body's still alive. And that is one of the ultimate fears, which is useful because fear is important as well. It's a tool. And obviously we can see how it can be manipulated. But if you're if you're self-destructing, like people, unfortunately, and it's obviously such a terrible thing and so sad, but suicide, the rebirth to that, like whatever lessons, like if you had to learn forgiveness, you will keep reincarnating until you learn forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And
One of my favorite books in this is called Journey of Souls. And this psychotherapist, who was also a hypnotherapist, was doing regression and past life regression sessions with people. He ended up writing this book in the 90s, and I think Michael Newton is his name. And spontaneously, he basically like was hearing a past life from a client who's under hypnosis, and the client died in that past life, and then they just stayed with the past life person who died as they like left their body and kind of went to the other side. And what emerged was what he called life between lives regression hypnosis, essentially. And read this book after like 30 years of case studies about what people were describing, the other side being like. And it's a fucking brilliant book. And basically the first chapter is death and dying, and then the last couple of chapters are choosing a new body and what lessons we're going to learn, and then being rebirthed. It's fascinating. And it
choosing a new body.
Yeah, it really rings true for me. I have a sense that it's the best kind of body of knowledge that I've found that like really gets at my sense of what's happening on like the other side. I feel like we know a lot about birth to death, but not a ton about death to birth, like the kind of other side of the
I like how you put that. First time I heard that concept was with this guy named Robert Edward Grant, talking about how before you were born, you already chose who you're going to fall in love with, who are your betrayers. You already chose the life path that you were going to go on. And I think you can feel that when things start happening. Like if you're on the path and you're in alignment, that's the law of attraction. Things come into your life. The right people come into your life. The right decisions happen. So you kind of move effortlessly through life. And of course there is effort and there is challenge, but the people who are, I think they called it moving from 3D to 4D, people who are still in the perpetrator victim cycle, is maybe everybody's level 1 is to get out of the victim cycle and into the healing path. And to close the loop on aliens and things, one of the biggest downloads I had for us to have world peace or to move to type 2 is, and this is my work and what I think is important, is incorporating more of the other races, people who don't look like me at all, people who have totally different views and beliefs. Because right now, the way it's been set up throughout history, because of abundance and colonization and things, the spiritual community and mental health is primarily white and wealthy.
Yeah.
Which our enemies are of different races as well. So the faster we can really boil the pot, and like really be inclusive, really be loving and understanding, the less fearful others are going to be. Because I remember I had a neighbor once. I was living in a rough apartment complex, and this person looked like he came straight from the Middle East. He was an older gentleman wearing his traditional clothing, and the looks on his face and everything, like I was kind of afraid of this person. And so people just are afraid of what they don't know.
For sure.
Right? So I think that's the last thread on it. Like once we have a bigger community of diverse faces, there's less fear and more acceptance.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, that's what we're trying to do with Thank You Life, is really bring a sense of equity to access to these things. And I think it's there's a lot more to it than just the role we're playing. And I think one piece of that is really helping train practitioners from all different social locations, socioeconomic locations, and racial, sexual locations, like kind of the whole spectrum of all of that.
Which is I can see that. I can see how it's very disproportionate right now. And if you help those who, like you said, equity, if you help, which equal opportunity, right? Is that what's equity like?
Yeah. So in this sense is like, equal opportunity to access healing, to access like,
Yeah, removing the financial barrier, which
exactly.
is, like you were saying, like donations and monthly donations are very helpful. And money is such a spiritual idea as well. Like we vote with our dollar bills on who stays in business and who doesn't,
Yeah.
and who gets help and who doesn't. And you're bridging that gap completely. So now it's going to reach a totally different community that systematically gets suppressed. And whether it be intentional or not, it does seem like the darker your skin, the more native you look, the more discrimination you face. And I don't know why that is. Because I'm in the middle. Like, I'm not fully native looking, but I'm not fully European looking. But then I look at people from Guatemala or just different genetics that are more native, unfortunately, because they're in that country that's still developing. They come to this country and they do the jobs that are $7 an hour, maybe $10 an hour. They're doing the jobs that we don't want to do, which I don't know how to fix those situations and the economy and things like that. But I think the faster, because they're also the ones that are developing, the ones that are in the lower economic are the ones that are more to do crimes, pollution, and cause disruption, because those are the ones who are just trying to survive. So maybe if we help those kind of communities, the exponentiality of this work improves. And that's just my theories. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. And another way that I think about this kind of thing is like, so there's money and the ability to pay for the above ground things. And then there's also like, willingness to do underground stuff, knowledge that like underground psychedelic therapy is even a thing, and having like being around a community where these sorts of things are talked about, mental health is talked about, and like a lot of people that are doing yoga, like I feel like most people that I know here in Austin, just because of the scene I'm in, are coaches.
Life coaches?
Life coaches. This is a very specific and like unique kind of scene I'm in here. And I think with anything, we're going to have access to a lot of the like services and knowledge that our community holds. And right now, those kind of communities that are really diving into like mental health and wellness, a lot of times those are more like wealthy white communities. And at least the wealthy part, I think, makes a bit of sense. I've heard something like what rich people are doing today, everybody will be doing 30 years from now, something like this.
Wow.
I mean, I'm certainly not in that category of wealthy, but
it's all relative.
Yeah.
Compared to, people around the world. I think we're at the top here in this country and then in the city.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty blessed and grateful for that.
Yeah.
Kevin, any closing remarks, thoughts?
No, man, this is a fun, wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, honestly.
Cool.
And I feel like there's so much more in there too, but I gotta respect your time. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. As always, I'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Of course, brother.